is going to be our 10-minute video on memory. So, like I said, every week I try to limit these to about 10 minutes. For memory, I'm going to mostly focus on what you see right here, but I do want you to go through the whole PowerPoint with this. There's a couple of other slides that are really, really useful. So, for example, a couple slides down, you'll see this slide right here. That's just a practical example of how memory can work, from being at a concert for this example. Right after, I don't want to show you that slide on this video, but right after is a quick memory test that you can do where you can click on that slide, take about 60 seconds, and try to memorize that list. It's going to illustrate what's called the primacy effect and the recency effect, which is about how we do remember things. And then there's some information, if you scroll down a little bit further, on amnesia, which is going to be part of the discussion question for this week. So the amnesia and the hippocampus. We have some information about declarative, non-declarative memories. Declarative is more or less easy and straightforward, but think about non-declarative memories. So a great example of this is riding a bike. You've even heard the expression, it's as easy as riding the bike, but think about how you would explain to someone how to ride a bike. Parents all the time, they try to explain to their child how to ride a bike, but their child hops on the bike, they still fall, they still need training wheels because it's a skilled action and it's non-declarative. When we are looking at a skilled action, it's something that we can't describe fully. And think about how you would describe riding a bike. Keep the handlebars straight, pedal really fast, stay balanced. Well, staying balanced itself is a skilled action. Very hard to describe something like that, something that we have to learn ourselves. And then that adage of it's as easy as riding a bike, some of us may have not been on a bike for a very long time and could be able to hop on that bike and ride it without a problem. And then as you scroll down, some information towards the bottom on cognitive dissonance. You make sure you take a look at cognitive dissonance and schematic processing. Very important information. With schematic processing, it's just the way that our brains work. We rely on our brain to work like the snap of a finger. So if I ask you a question, if I asked you where your Sweet 16 was, or what your favorite movie is, or if I asked you what color your high school mascot was, your high school colors were, those things are popping right into your mind as we talk about that. It should be popping almost immediately into our mind. Well, the way that our mind works to be able to do that is through schematic processing, through heuristic thinking. If we didn't do that, our memory couldn't get from point A to point B that quick. We have to take shortcuts, and it's always important to remember that word right there, that the way that memory works is it's taking shortcuts. Well, as it relates to the slides that relate to stereotypes, for example, that's the same process here. It's a shortcut. Shortcuts can go wrong. Think about taking a shortcut while you're driving. It might get you home faster. Let's say it gets you home faster 99 out of 100 times. Probably a little bit less even than that. But there's still that 1 out of 100 times where we end up getting completely lost and it takes us twice as long. That can still happen with our memory. So, for example, if you've ever used the expression, it's on the tip of my tongue, that could be an example of that, where we stored a memory in a place that we don't know it's stored in. So you're trying to, it happens a lot with music. You're trying to remember, what's the name of that song? Oh, it's on the tip of my tongue. I know I've heard it before. Because naturally you might open up the folder for music, but it's not in that folder because where you stored it, it had more meaning somewhere else. Maybe it was an important song for a past significant other of yours. Well, it would have more meaning to store that song attached to that person than to just music in general. But you're not with that person anymore, so now you wouldn't know that it's there. Make sure you read up about heuristic thinking, schematic processing. I'm not going to take too much time about that because our discussion question for this week mostly talks about the 3 types of memory and the very next slide, the 3 memory processes. So I'm going to take the last 5 minutes of this video talking very quickly about this. So I'm not going to read through this. You can read through these things on your own. We have our sensory memory, our short-term memory, our long-term memory, and they each play a distinct role. Sensory memory's role is very simply to prevent us from getting overwhelmed, because sensory memory takes everything in. There's so much that goes on. When we're in the classroom, there's where everyone's sitting, who is there, what people are drinking, what people are writing with, so on and so forth. When we are walking through a mall. Think about how much information is there in terms of all information. That would say every single store. It would say what the sale is for every single store, what music is playing from every single store, every other person in the mall, what they're talking about, what they smell like, what they look like, all the other smells in the mall. If you smell like Annie Ann's pretzels or something, it always stands out, right? Everything going on is in our sensory memory. There's just too much. We would get overwhelmed if we were paying attention to every single one of those. And that's the important process here. How do we go from sensory memory to short-term memory? We pay attention. So now we're in our short-term memory. Short-term memory is very limited. It holds very much so for the average person 7 items. So it's 7 items, not 7 specific numbers. The reason that someone might be able to remember a 10-digit phone number using their short-term memory, you need the phone number for the pizza place, so you ask your friend or you ask your mom, what's the number for the pizza place? You don't have a pen, but you just keep rehearsing it, right? Keep repeating it and repeating it. Then you go to dial it. Well, the reason it's possible to remember that is because we don't have to remember 10 numbers as 10 individual items. Most people remember a phone number, area code is one item. Then, so you have 973 or 732, and then you have the prefix we remember as one item. 238 was a prefix I remember from when I was growing up. And then we might remember the last 4 numbers as one item, maybe 2 items. We can then remember that. So it doesn't have to be individual items, doesn't have to be an individual number or an individual letter, for example, for a word. It's just individual items. It only lasts for 2 to 30 seconds. A really good example of this. So there's a couple really good examples of different memory problems. Memento is a fantastic movie with doing this. A really good example of this is something that some of you might think of when you're reading the discussion question. That's the movie 50 First Dates. So 50 First Dates is not actually a great representation of the type of amnesia in the discussion question, because Drew Barrymore's character in that, she remembers things throughout the day. She forgets them when she goes to sleep, but she's creating memories throughout the day. But if you remember in that movie, if you have seen it 10-second time, it's actually a very good example of that, where you have 2 to 30 seconds and then it refreshes. And in the movie Memento, there's a really great scene that portrays this as well, where he's chasing someone and then finally gets to the destination and forgets why he's there. And that's going to be our short-term memory. It's limited, 7 items. It only lasts for a short period of time. And then we either are going to put it into our long-term memory or we're going to forget it. If we put it into our long-term memory, that's called encoding. Now, encoding is actually a really complex process. So make sure you do some extra reading about this in the book for the week, because encoding is something that you need to understand a little bit more than what I can really talk about in the 5 minutes that I'm going through this. But the easy way that we encode things from paying a focused attention, not just paying attention, but a focused attention. So we are now, instead of just watching something on Netflix while we're playing on our phone, that we're paying attention but not really paying a focused attention. Now you have that show, that one show that you have to watch where you can't look away, where if you look away, you miss something. Westworld's a great example of this. You look away, you miss something. You're missing something important. Encoding, when you're paying a focused attention to something, and it helps you to encode something. How does an actor remember the lines of the play that they're in? It's rehearsal. We can keep rehearsing things and then memorizing things that way, or forming new associations. So what does Roy G. Biv stand for? If anyone immediately popped 2 colors of the rainbow, that's because you have an association for that. Then we put things into our long-term memory. Now, if it's in long-term memory, it's there. It's there forever. Theoretically, everything in long-term memory can be retrieved. In practice, okay, we can all think of a time where something was on the tip of our tongue. That doesn't mean that we couldn't retrieve it. What that means is it's just not worth retrieving. When something's on the tip of our tongue, well, sometimes it comes to us. Sometimes it comes to us after a minute. But if it's not, well, eventually we can do a full system scan just like you would do on your computer. But that takes a long period of time that we're just frustrated the whole time waiting. So a lot of times what happens is we get frustrated and give up. It's not that we couldn't retrieve it. We will not reach any maximum for our long-term memory. So it's relatively unlimited amounts of information. We would have to store memories in an impractical way for us to reach that maximum. So because we don't do that, because we don't just store memories in every single folder going into schemas that we possibly could use it in, because we don't do that with memories unless they're important. We won't reach that maximum. And then how do you actually use something from your memory? That's retrieval. And with retrieval, what you're doing is you're pulling it back into your working memory. So this is using that same 7 items of your short-term and working memory. That's going to actually play an important role when we get to our article discussion with eyewitness testimony, is as you're trying to pull something out of your long-term memory to say explain what the person looks like to a sketch artist, you're also using all the things overwhelming your short-term memory that's going on at that given time as well. And yeah, that's basically it for this 10-minute video. So if you have any more questions, you let me know. I can always post another video. We can go into more detail about it, but I want to keep these videos to about 10, and we're at about 10 minutes and 45 seconds. So I'm going to stop for right now.